Hello, and welcome to Poems You Need, where two poets who believe in the transformative power of language share the poems that sustain and inspire us.
Hi, I'm Kelli Russell Agodon,
And I'm Melissa Studdard.
and today we're reading poems by Hieu Minh Nguyen. And I'm going to begin by one of Hugh's poems, which is one of my favorite poems in all the land. It's called Changeling. Standing in front of a mirror, my mother tells me she is ugly, says the medication is making her fat. I laugh and walk her back to bed. My mother tells me she is ugly in the same voice she used to say, "No woman could love you." And I watch her, pull at her body, and it is mine, my heavy breast, my disappointing shape. She asks for a bowl of plain broth, and it becomes the cup of vinegar she would pour down my throat. Every day after school, I would kneel before her. I would remove my clothes and ask her to mark the progress. It's important that I mention I truly wanted to be beautiful for her. In my dreams, I am thin, and if not thin, something better. I tell my mother she is beautiful, and she laughs. The room fills with flies. They gather in the shape of a small boy. They lead her back to the mirror, but my reflection is still there.
Incredible. And the line breaks are so significant, and you did a really good job of making sure that that came across. And I'm thinking about, I truly wanted to be beautiful
Yeah.
for her. When you get to for her, it's kind of devastating. Also, just the balance between the literal and the surreal in this poem is so interesting. The fragmentation of self that becomes those flies that then gathers in the shape of a small boy. I mean,
It,
what a stunning image. I am so taken with this idea of the transmission or transference of shame intergenerationally, and the thought about how the way we talk about ourselves in front of other people really matters.
that image made me feel like this poem was in conversation with Robert Haas's A Story About the Body. And that poem is about two people at an artist residency, and there's kind of like a romance looking like it might happen. And the woman says that she's had a mastectomy. She tells the man who's kind of coming to see her and be with her, and he rejects her. And so she puts dead bees, she sweeps up the dead bees from her cabin, if I'm remembering right, and then leaves them on the porch. It's a major poem, but it does. This poem just like talks to that with bringing in the flies with the shape of a small boy, that kind of idea of our bodies not being good enough, and so almost like bringing in the image of insects or something that isn't as pleasurable because it's that same metaphor for the body. It's both of those poems, and this poem especially is one that I have returned to this poem so many times, just because I love studying what Hugh does in it to tell this story, to show the love and also the challenges of them all.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I like what you were saying about the insects too, because they're small, and that's interesting. In the Haas poem, it's interesting because the person who is judging her is small, and also what you said about
Yeah.
insects as well. But then in this, like, being small is a good thing, or it's supposedly a good thing. So that's very interesting to turn into something that's small, but he has to be broken to get there. So
Yeah.
that's really fascinating. Well, my poem also deals with family, And it's a very just beautiful poem, and we've gone from the mother to the grandmother in this one, and so I'll go ahead and share that now since they relate to each other. So it's called Reunion. You can't uncremate your grandmother. You can't think of regret as a town you move to when grief snores too loud in every room. You can't siphon her dust back into your arms, and if you could, she'd still be gone. Still be the coat of gray settling on the windowsill. Be grateful for the first child who dug a hole and thought, "Mother." Be grateful that we bury our dead and not leave them where they died. Bodies flooding over highway medians, the bed you shared and will continue to share with your grandmother, the city, a sea of leather, ruined by heat. In death, we belong to everyone who can pass our names through their warm mouths, who can smell the rotten air without flinching, who can tilt their noses up into the sky and think, family.
Mm. I think what really moves me about this poem is how the poem begins through negation, and then there's those you can't statements, and then at the end, and there's three you can't statements, and then at the end, there's three who can pass, who can smell, who can tilt. So I felt like that was kind of a scaffolding or an emotional scaffolding to hold this poem like that container, which really interested me. And then that line, "You can't uncremate your grandmother." I mean, that's your mic drop. I don't know if I wrote that line, if I could even write the poem because that's such a good line, to kind of coin your own word, "You can't uncremate your grandmother," because that made me really have to think about, like, cremation and uncremation and what that means. Um, but I think that the second the voice speaks to that second person you, and that it just widens grief because at the end, in death, we belong to everyone, and I thought that was such this poem is both healing, but it doesn't let you off the hook for feeling the grief.
Yeah, so true. And I love what you said about emotional scaffolding, the idea that something is so emotional intense that it needs something to hold it up, something that will keep you from just crashing into it. And I love this line, "You can't uncremate your grandmother." And he gets pretty literal there with the coat of gray settling on the windowsill and the idea of a person as dust. And Kelly, you've said in a lot of our other episodes how you really love the way a poet can say something without actually saying it. So just by talking about the gray on the windowsill, we're all in the mind of ashes to
Yep.
ashes, dust to dust, and just a very interesting side door into thinking about that, and it's beautiful. And I I too really love this ending. The idea, once again, is not expressed directly. It feels a little askew in a really good way that makes us think of what people normally say about how someone who has passed on continues to live through the people who they leave behind, but he says it in such a unique way about belonging to everyone in death, who can pass our names,
Yeah.
their mouths, and the idea of thinking family and looking up at the sky. It's really beautiful.
It is, and that what you had said about the emotional scaffolding holding this poem, at the end, he has community holding us all, holding our grief, and holding the memory of those who passed, and he did it all through imagery and just, like, this gentle storytelling, and, those statements. Yeah, it's a stunning poem to think about exactly what you said, that we had the gray settling on the windowsill. So this idea that the dead are still we all turn to earth and the dead are still kind of the dust that rises.
Yeah, and you're right about this it's a subtle movement of the poem from, a personal, internal, private grief into a communal grief. You feel it almost feels, even though it never says it, as if someone is at home grieving and then they've gone to the funeral.
Oh,
Um,
that's a good point. That's right.
yeah. I did wanna say one other thing, like, totally unrelated, and that I think I meant to mention during your poem, which is that I, gave a reading, a big group reading, many years ago that Hugh was a part of, and I remember he had, these beautifully painted fingernails and tattoos, and so to read this poem about not feeling beautiful. I don't know, it just goes to show
Yeah.
how many people are feeling that when you would
When
never think that would be someone who would feel that way, you know?
Right, and that's a lot of stuff that's generationally, but you can't say the word, but, like, passed down to
Yeah.
us, and so then we end up with these voices in our head, and other people, like, look at Hugh or poets in the world or people in the world and think you're beautiful, but the person has this underlying sense of not being beautiful enough or not being beautiful at all. I mean, one of the lines he said is, "I truly," or that he just wanted to be better, if not thinner. So that idea of we're not good enough when really just by being alive and on this planet good enough, let's not get so focused on, how we look because ultimately nobody ever sees like the most beautiful person if they have that dark, angry, awful energy, like,
Yeah,
they lose their beauty.
yeah, yeah, it's right. Mean is not beautiful.
Mean and hateful, just not equal beauty. You lose your beauty if you're hateful to people.
It's so true.
These are 2 good poems that really speak to each other and, honor, you know, the matriarch, and I loved seeing that.
Yes, lovely. So, thank you to Hugh.
Yeah, thanks to
Yeah.
you. Beautiful work.